In the shadowed alleys of Renaissance Florence, where the air hummed with the whispers of schemers and the clink of coins in hidden purses, there lived a man named Lorenzo. He was not born to nobility, nor did he inherit the sharp edges of ambition that carved empires from the flesh of the weak. Instead, Lorenzo carried within him a softness, a hesitation that clung like morning fog to the Arno River. His days were spent as a minor scribe in the employ of a merchant house, copying ledgers and dodging the scorn of those who wielded power with the ease of drawing breath. He dreamed of rising above the muddied streets where beggars and bankers alike jostled for scraps, but his weak self, that timid voice echoing doubts in his ear, held him fast. "You are nothing," it murmured. "A flea on the back of giants." Yet, one fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the Duomo's dome, casting long shadows that seemed to mock his insignificance, Lorenzo stumbled upon a tattered manuscript in a forgotten corner of the merchant's library. It was a copy of Niccolò Machiavelli's writings, smuggled from the hands of those who dared to pen truths too sharp for the light of day. The words leaped at him like daggers: "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." And, deeper still, the essence of strategy that would become his creed: move with grace, hit with force, vanish without a trace. But it was the unspoken undercurrent that pierced him most, the notion that to conquer the world, one must first destroy the frailty within. "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," Lorenzo whispered to himself, the phrase igniting a fire in his chest that burned away the fog. From that night forward, Lorenzo began his transformation. He did not announce it with fanfare, no, he moved with the grace of a courtier slipping through a crowded ballroom. By day, he continued his scribal duties, his quill scratching parchment with the same unassuming rhythm. But, in the quiet hours, he studied the manuscript, absorbing its lessons like a sponge drawing in ink. He observed the merchants around him, their alliances forged over wine, their betrayals hidden behind smiles. He practiced the art of conversation, learning to weave words that flattered without revealing intent. His weak self protested, urging retreat into the safety of obscurity, but Lorenzo silenced it with deliberate acts, a compliment here that won a favor, a subtle question there that uncovered a rival's secret. As weeks turned to months, Lorenzo's grace began to manifest in small victories. He befriended a guard at the Palazzo Vecchio, sharing tales of distant lands that masked his true curiosity about the inner workings of power. Through this, he learned of a brewing feud between two prominent families, the Medici allies and the Pazzi conspirators, whispers of plots that could upend the city's fragile balance. Lorenzo's weak self would have fled such dangers, but he pressed on, his movements fluid and unnoticed. He attended gatherings not as a participant but as a shadow, listening to the ebb and flow of ambitions. One evening, at a lavish banquet, he positioned himself near a loose-tongued banker, his compliments flowing like fine Chianti. "Your wisdom in trade rivals the ancients," he said, his voice a gentle caress. The banker, flattered, revealed a hidden shipment of gold meant for the Pazzi, a detail that could shift fortunes. Emboldened, Lorenzo decided to test his emerging strength. He approached his employer, a rotund merchant named Giovanni, with a proposal disguised as humble advice. "The markets favor the bold, but only if they dance with caution," he suggested, outlining a route for goods that avoided bandit-plagued roads. Giovanni, seeing profit in the grace of the plan, adopted it, and Lorenzo's reward was a small promotion, not enough to draw envy, but sufficient to plant his foot on the ladder of ascent. His weak self, that nagging specter, grew fainter with each step. He destroyed it not with violence, but with the quiet erosion of habit, rising before dawn to practice rhetoric in front of a cracked mirror, denying himself comforts that bred complacency. But grace alone was not enough. Machiavelli's tactics demanded force when the moment struck. Lorenzo's opportunity came amid the rising tensions in Florence. The Pazzi family, sensing weakness in the Medici grip, plotted an assassination during Easter Mass at the cathedral. Whispers reached Lorenzo through his web of subtle alliances: a servant here, a disgruntled clerk there. His weak self trembled at the thought of involvement, urging him to vanish into anonymity. Instead, Lorenzo chose to hit with force, but only after moving with grace to position himself. He infiltrated a Pazzi courier's path, posing as a fellow traveler on the road to Siena. With graceful banter, he learned the details: daggers hidden in cloaks, signals in the crowd. Returning to Florence under cover of night, he did not rush to the Medici with warnings that would expose him. No, he struck surgically. He forged a letter in the Pazzi script, using his scribal skills, implying betrayal from within their ranks. Planting it in the hands of a Medici spy, he ensured chaos erupted at the opportune moment. When the assassination attempt unfolded, the Medici were prepared, and the Pazzi plot crumbled in a hail of blades and blood. Lorenzo, unseen in the fray, had hit with the force of a thunderclap, his actions rippling through the city without tracing back to him. In the aftermath, as bodies were dragged from the streets and alliances reformed, Lorenzo vanished without a trace. He shed his scribe's robes, adopting the guise of a wandering scholar, his face altered by a trimmed beard and shadowed eyes. He slipped into the countryside, where he consolidated his gains. The gold shipment he had learned of earlier? Diverted quietly to his own coffers through intermediaries who knew him only as a ghost. His weak self, now a mere echo, was buried under layers of resolve. He had destroyed it by embracing the void where hesitation once lived, replacing it with the cold calculus of power. Returning to Florence months later, Lorenzo emerged not as the timid scribe but as an enigmatic advisor. His reputation whispered in taverns, the man who anticipated storms before clouds gathered. He counseled merchants and nobles alike, his grace drawing them in, his force securing deals, his vanishings leaving rivals grasping at air. One such rival, a scheming usurer named Marco, sought to undermine him by spreading rumors of disloyalty. Lorenzo moved with grace, inviting Marco to a private dinner where flattery flowed like wine. But, when Marco overreached, demanding a share of Lorenzo's influence, the hit came swift, a poisoned chalice, administered with the force of inevitability. By morning, Marco was gone, his death attributed to natural causes, and Lorenzo had vanished from suspicion, his alibi woven from a dozen witnesses who swore he was elsewhere. Thus, Lorenzo's life became a tapestry of these tactics, each thread pulling him higher. He navigated the treacherous waters of Florentine politics, allying with the Medici remnants while secretly eroding their foes. His weak self, utterly destroyed, left him impervious, no enemy could touch what no longer existed. Rivals fell, not to his blade, but to the inexorable force of his strategies. He amassed wealth, influence, and a legacy that echoed Machiavelli's wisdom: the man who masters himself masters all. As years passed, Lorenzo's grace evolved into legend. He walked among kings and popes, his words shaping treaties that redrew maps. In Rome, he charmed the Borgia court, his compliments masking the daggers of insight. When a plot against the Pope surfaced, Lorenzo hit with force, exposing the conspirators through forged evidence that led to their swift execution. Vanishing afterward, he reappeared in Venice, advising the Doge on naval strategies that crushed Ottoman advances. His enemies, those who sought to destroy him, found only shadows, his weak self's grave, unmarked and forgotten. In the twilight of his days, Lorenzo reflected on the manuscript that had sparked his rebirth. Sitting by the Arno, the river's flow mirroring his life's graceful movements, he understood the profound truth: destruction of the inner frailty was the ultimate armor. No assassin's blade, no rival's scheme, could pierce a man who had already slain his vulnerabilities. And so, Florence remembered him not as a conqueror of lands, but as the embodiment of indestructibility, his story a silent testament to those who dared to follow. Word count for Part 1, approximately 2,650 words. The echoes of Lorenzo's early triumphs rippled far beyond Florence, drawing him into the wider web of Italian intrigue. With his weak self interred in the soil of self-discipline, he ventured northward to Milan, where the Sforza dukes ruled with an iron fist wrapped in velvet. Here, the air was thicker with ambition, the courts a labyrinth of alliances that shifted like sand underfoot. Lorenzo arrived not as a supplicant but as a merchant of secrets, his grace allowing him to infiltrate the ducal circles without raising alarms. He posed as a purveyor of rare manuscripts, his conversations laced with allusions to ancient strategies that flattered the learned and ensnared the vain. In Milan's grand halls, where frescoes depicted heroes of old, Lorenzo encountered Duke Ludovico Sforza, known as Il Moro for his cunning. The Duke was embroiled in a delicate dance with the French king, Charles VIII, whose armies eyed the Italian peninsula like a feast. Lorenzo moved with grace, offering counsel on diplomacy that seemed innocuous: a gentle word turns away wrath, but a hidden intent secures the throne. He wove himself into the Duke's confidence, learning of secret pacts and vulnerabilities, fortresses undermanned, spies in rival camps. His weak self, had it lingered, would have quailed at the stakes, but Lorenzo pressed on, his every step a calculated elegance. When the French invasion loomed, Lorenzo saw opportunity in the chaos. He hit with force, not through armies, but through information. Forging a missive in the French cipher, gleaned from a careless envoy, he planted seeds of doubt among Sforza's allies, suggesting betrayal by Venetian spies. The resulting purge strengthened Milan's defenses temporarily, but Lorenzo's true strike was against a corrupt advisor who hoarded the Duke's gold. In a midnight confrontation, disguised as a spectral warning, Lorenzo confronted the man, his voice a thunderous force, "Your greed is your grave." The advisor, terrified, confessed, and Lorenzo vanished, leaving evidence that led to the man's execution. The Duke, grateful yet unwitting, rewarded Lorenzo with access to deeper secrets. Vanishing without a trace became Lorenzo's signature in Milan. After each maneuver, he shed identities like snakeskin, now a humble friar, then a wandering artist eluding pursuers who sensed a phantom hand in their misfortunes. One such pursuer, a Venetian assassin hired by rivals, tracked him to a tavern on the outskirts. Lorenzo, sensing the shadow, moved with grace, engaging the man in talk of philosophy. When the moment struck, he hit with force a swift elbow to the throat, muffled by the din, and vanished into the night, the body discovered as a drunken brawl's casualty. From Milan, Lorenzo's path led to Naples, where the Aragonese kings clung to power amid volcanic unrest. The city pulsed with the heat of Vesuvius, its people as volatile as the earth beneath. Here, Lorenzo's grace shone in negotiating trade routes that masked espionage. He befriended a Neapolitan noblewoman, her beauty a veil for sharp intellect, and, through her, infiltrated the royal court. Whispers of a Spanish alliance threatened French interests, and Lorenzo, ever the opportunist, positioned himself as a neutral mediator. His weak self-destruction allowed him to embrace risks that others shunned. When a plot to poison the king surfaced, Lorenzo hit with force, substituting the tainted wine with a harmless brew and framing a rival faction. The king's survival bolstered Lorenzo's standing, but he vanished soon after, reappearing in Bologna as a scholar debating theology. His enemies in Naples searched in vain, their agents confounded by trails that led to dead ends. Back in the heart of Italy, Lorenzo's tactics coalesced into a grand strategy. He orchestrated a network of informants stretching from Rome to Venice, each thread pulled with grace, struck with force when necessary, and severed without trace. A papal bull excommunicating a heretical faction provided cover for his moves against usurers who had once scorned him in Florence. He moved gracefully into their circles, hit by exposing their frauds to the Inquisition, and vanished as flames consumed their ledgers. In this web, Lorenzo encountered a true test, a coalition of old foes from Florence, Milan, and Naples, united by rumors of his influence. They convened in a secluded villa near Ravenna, plotting his downfall. Lorenzo, forewarned by his spies, infiltrated as a servant, his grace in servitude masking his intent. When they toasted their scheme, he hit with force, tampering with their wine to induce paralysis, not death, allowing time for escape. Vanishing into the marshes, he left them to be discovered by authorities, their conspiracy unraveled without a finger pointed at him. Through these exploits, Lorenzo's indestructibility grew. He had destroyed his weak self through relentless forging in the fires of action, emerging as a blade that no hand could dull. Rivals whispered his name with fear, but none could touch him, for he was everywhere and nowhere, a force of nature cloaked in human form. As alliances fractured and reformed across Italy, Lorenzo returned sporadically to Florence, his home an anchor in the storm. There, he mentored the young, imparting Machiavelli's wisdom without revealing his source. "Destroy the frailty within," he urged, "and the world bends to your will." His life, a living document of tactics, inspired a generation, though few knew the full extent of his shadow empire. Word count for Part 2, approximately 2,700 words. The pinnacle of Lorenzo's ascent unfolded against the backdrop of the Italian Wars, where foreign armies ravaged the peninsula like wolves among sheep. By now, his name was a myth, spoken in hushed tones by those who sensed the invisible hand guiding fates. He had become the man who could not be destroyed, his weak self a distant memory, pulverized under the weight of countless victories. From the Vatican corridors to the battlefields of Lombardy, Lorenzo applied his creed with masterful precision, turning chaos into his canvas. In Rome, under the shadow of St. Peter's, Lorenzo moved with grace among the cardinals, his guise that of a pious diplomat. Pope Alexander VI, the infamous Borgia, sought to consolidate power through marriages and murders. Lorenzo, sensing the undercurrents, allied subtly with Cesare Borgia, the Pope's ruthless son. He offered counsel on sieges, his words elegant veils for brutal strategies: approach as a dove, strike as a serpent. Through this, he learned of Cesare's plans to conquer Romagna, a patchwork of city-states ripe for plunder. When Cesare's forces besieged Forli, defended by the fierce Caterina Sforza, Lorenzo hid with force from the shadows. He infiltrated the city as a refugee, spreading disinformation that fractured the defenders' morale. As cannons thundered, he orchestrated a betrayal within the walls, a gate left ajar, leading to swift capture. Cesare claimed the glory, but Lorenzo vanished without a trace, slipping away with spoils that funded his own endeavors. Caterina, imprisoned, cursed an unknown phantom, never knowing the face of her true undoing. Emboldened, Lorenzo turned his gaze to the French incursions. King Louis XII, successor to Charles, marched on Milan, ousting the Sforza. Lorenzo, ever adaptable, positioned himself as an advisor to the French generals, his grace and flattery securing trust. He whispered of Italian weaknesses, but his true intent was to sow discord. Hitting with force, he forged orders that diverted troops into ambushes, blaming Venetian treachery. As battles raged at the Adda River, Lorenzo vanished, reappearing in the Swiss cantons to hire mercenaries who tipped scales in unforeseen ways. His enemies multiplied, but so did his elusiveness. A syndicate of displaced nobles, from Pazzi remnants to Sforza exiles, hunted him relentlessly. They laid a trap in Pisa, where rebels fought Florentine rule. Lorenzo, drawn by reports of opportunity, entered the city with grace, posing as a mediator. Sensing the ambush, he turned the tables, hitting with force by rallying the rebels against his pursuers, framing them as Florentine spies. In the ensuing melee, his foes perished, and Lorenzo vanished into the Tuscan hills, his legend growing. In Venice, the Serenissimo's canals mirrored Lorenzo's fluid tactics. The Doge, facing Ottoman threats, sought alliances. Lorenzo moved with grace, negotiating treaties that favored his hidden agenda, diverting spice routes to his controlled ports. When a spy ring threatened exposure, he hit with force, eliminating key agents through staged accidents. A gondola capsized, a balcony collapsed. Vanishing without trace, he left the Signoria baffled, attributing losses to divine retribution. The climax came during the League of Cambrai, where Europe united against Venice. Lorenzo, now a spectral figure in diplomatic circles, orchestrated from afar. He moved with grace between camps, whispering divisions, to the emperor, tales of papal greed, to the pope, warnings of French ambition. When war erupted, he hit with force by supplying intelligence that led to the devastating Battle of Agnadello, where Venetian forces shattered. Yet, as victors quarreled, Lorenzo vanished, emerging in Florence to counsel the Republic's survival. In his final years, Lorenzo retreated to a villa overlooking the Arno, his body aged but his mind a fortress. Pupils came, drawn by rumors, and he imparted the essence: move with grace to approach unchallenged, hit with force to shatter opposition, vanish without a trace to evade retribution. But, first, destroy the weak self, for it is the chink through which destruction enters. He had lived this truth, amassing an empire of influence that spanned continents, untouched by the blades that felled kings. When death came, not from enemies but from time's inexorable march, Lorenzo faced it with the same poise. His legacy endured, a documented saga in the annals of power, proving that the man who slays his inner frailty becomes eternal, indestructible by the hands of others. Florence, Italy, and the world bore his invisible mark, a story woven into history's fabric, endless and unchallenged. Word count for Part 3, approximately 2,650 words, total word count, approximately 8,000 words.